So hopefully no one's going to walk in this time. I guess it's one of the perils of doing a video or having to make a video at school, between lessons to make sure, nobody comes into the room. Which I might do. My hair's terrible. It's gone all bouffant. After washing it, it's dried in this weird way, and I'm getting grayer and grayer. Oh dear. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, Book Time with Elvis, with me, Mark, and I'm coming to you today from my place of work. But I wanted to get this tag video made, because I'm not sure when I'll have the opportunity to do it. And Faith from Faith and Books kindly tagged me in this. It's the Read Smart tag, and it was created by To Readers It May Concern and Prose and Petticoats. There are 8 different prompts, so let's go through them. The first one: what is your strategy to stay focused, engaged while reading? I think, of course, it would be to remove distractions, such as the telephone, where I might be inclined to, pick up and scroll through things or check things out. I mean, one of my biggest problems when it comes to this kind of thing is I often read on the iPad or on the Kindle, and I find when I'm reading something, especially, of course, nonfiction, I come up against something I want to know more about, or I want to look something up, and then I might fall down a rabbit hole, and that is a very difficult distraction. And I can find, several minutes, if not, 30 minutes, half an hour or so has passed before I get back to reading. So that can be a big distraction, but it's better to be away from communication and internet devices, I would say, anyway. I also don't like to have any kind of speaking on, so like the television or radio, though I do like having music on in the background. That doesn't bother me. So yeah, I don't really have like a full-on strategy, but I will definitely avoid distractions where possible. So number 2, how does your environment influence your focus, and what can you do to optimize it? I think that's true, that your environment definitely has an impact and influence on how you focus on things. Where I live now is extremely quiet, generally speaking, and therefore it's easier to concentrate. When you hear particular noises, although you do get used to them, like living in the town before, I got used to the noise of traffic, so it didn't distract me. But anytime there was an unusual noise, of course, that would be a distraction and break my focus. But I generally like to find somewhere that is comfortable and has good enough light, natural light, and whatnot, to be able to read, and that certainly will improve my focus. Number 3, what methods do you use to retain and recall information from what you've read? I don't know, to be honest with you. I tend to just recall, I'm usually able to recall useless bits of information, but then forget who the author might have been or what the correct title of the book was that I read. I don't use any particular methods in order to do that. It just kind of happens, perhaps organically, and I don't know why I remember some things over other things. It's just the way it is, but I don't have any particular plan in place in order to be able to do that. Number 4, how do you approach difficult or challenging material? I don't know if I have, a particular approach to that kind of thing. I don't know necessarily what's going to be difficult or challenging before I read it, right? So, I suppose there are some things that you can make a guess might be more challenging or more difficult, but I try to just approach it in a normal way that I would anything else, and generally I get through it. I'm not too fazed by picking up, some bit of pulp crime, or picking up Shakespeare or Chaucer. It doesn't really bother me. I take each book on a case-by-case basis, and if I do find it challenging or difficult, it depends if what I've read means that I want to continue with it, in which case I will then work out on a case-by-case basis what to do with it and how to proceed. Otherwise, I will just put it to one side. I never like to say DNF, because there's always a chance I might go back, but it could be like a temporary DNF. Number 5, what role do note-taking and annotation play in your reading process? Pretty much none. Although, as I mentioned before, I do read a lot on electronic devices, and I do find myself highlighting certain passages quite often in books. How often do I go back to those highlights is another question, and that's not very often. I usually highlight them because I find they will be interesting to either friends of mine or family, and therefore I want to tell them about it, or to you guys, of course, as well. If there's a particular passage I want to highlight when I'm talking about a book on my channel, then I look back at the highlights. But generally speaking, I don't. So yeah, and I don't really do any note taking or annotation anymore. I did when I was a student, of course, but now not. I don't really see personally how I might benefit from that, but you never know. And perhaps if I have a particularly challenging book, or something, then maybe that would help. So I'm not against it. It's just not something I do, again, organically or naturally. Number 6, how do you balance reading for pleasure with reading for personal, professional development? I have to say, luckily for my own personal and professional development, reading for that is also a pleasure for me. So I don't see a difference between the two. I can understand for some people there might be, but as a teacher, and the reading I do is based around the various subjects that I teach, I have an interest in those subjects. I take pleasure in those subjects. So reading about them and educating myself through reading about those subjects and furthering my professional development is an enjoyment and a pleasure. So I don't have to balance it. Reading for me is always a pleasure, unless of course it's reading, instructions on how to build a flat pack bit of furniture or something. Then it's not so much of a pleasure, it can be more of a frustration. Although of course these days it's mostly pictures rather than words. So number 7, what is the importance of setting reading goals? I don't think it's important. Certainly, it's not important in the way that I mean as something to get stressed over or to have to stick to or worry about. For just as a personal challenge, it can be important. I like to challenge myself and set goals, like to read maybe a certain amount of books in a year. But again, I don't really fuss if I don't come in over that. I tend to set it lower, knowing that I can break it, so I don't give myself any extra disappointment. And maybe to try and read a couple of so-called challenging works a year, but that's about it. It's not something I set a huge amount of store by. And number 8, what are some strategies for overcoming reading slumps or lack of motivation? I find the best way to get out of a reading slump for me is to return to a beloved work or a beloved author. I usually like some kind of short criminal story, maybe some kind of cozy mystery, or something funny. So the likes of Jeeves and Wooster by P.G. Wodehouse would be something that I would go to get out of a reading slump. Harriet Steele's Nuala series about a detective in Sri Lanka is something I would go to get out of a reading slump. And I think even now, having discovered the delights of Inspector Maigret, Rumpole of the Bailey is another one, of course, Perry Mason, these people I can see, as ones that I would go to in order to pull myself out of a reading slump. Flashman books, maybe, Patrick O'Brien's Aubrey Maturin series, and then more recently, I was thinking, I've forgotten his name. Oh well, it doesn't matter. But there are definitely lots of wonderful series and books that I can use to pull myself out of any particular reading slump. I find when I get one or two of them under my belt, it's usually enough to pull through. So there we have it. That is my Read Smart, my version of the Read Smart tag. Again, thank you to Faith from Faith and Books for tagging me, and to Read As It May Concern and Prose and Petticoats for creating the tag. And if you liked it, I tag you and encourage you to do it. So on that note, I better get back to work before a load of kids storm into this room. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.